So in the next couple minutes, I have a goal. And that goal is to make you rethink how you communicate. But more importantly, the sequence in how you communicate. See, I grew up having ideas. I look around the room and I see kids, I see adults, I see business professionals, I see people from all walks of life. And there's one thing I know that we all have in common, is that we all have ideas. And if you're like me growing up, I was a kid that shared an idea, but no one would listen. I'd tell a joke, and for some reason nobody would laugh. But then my buddy over here, he'd tell a joke, and all of a sudden everybody would start laughing. Or then they'd share that idea, and all of a sudden everybody start listening. And I was always fascinated with that process. Well, now I'm older, I say fascinated. Back then it sucked. And so what I want to share with you over the next few minutes is something that I came up with over the last 20 years of trying to figure this out. Is what is it about my ideas? What is it about our ideas? And why is it that we listen? And why is it that we don't listen? I know one thing for sure is that most of the people in this room at some point in their life are going to have to interview for a job at some point. Maybe when you get that job, you're going to have an idea, and you're going to want to share that idea. And whether you progress or not, unfortunately, is going to be dependent on whether people listen to that idea. And as I got older, I started thinking about that concept. We hear things like leadership, we hear things like persuasion, but for me, it really just comes down to influence. And so what I want to show you over the next few minutes here is something that I came up with and something that really dawned on me as a very simple methodology to do it. But the first thing we need to understand, to even understand this method, is we understand the brain works in a certain sequence. But most of our life, we've been taught to work against how our brain actually works. In fact, I'll give you an example. I have a confession to make. It's actually kind of a big one. Deep secret. Haven't shared it with anybody. And I'd like to share it with you. But first, I'd like for you to share one. Would you, deep secret, would you? Yeah, no, of course not. Yeah, no, of course you wouldn't want to share that, right? See, what happens here is I want vulnerability, I want to share something, and I want to do something, but maybe I want you to do it first, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm not sharing anything if you haven't shared something. And what happened is your brain looked at a sequence there. Looked at the sequence of saying, okay, hold on a second, you go first. And if you go first and it's safe out there, then maybe I'll share that idea. But so often, most of us want people to engage in things. We want people to listen to things, but maybe we're not even present ourselves, and we ask others to do that. And so when we think about that concept of our brain working in a certain sequence, I want you to take a look at this picture. Think about our brain and how we communicate in this sequence of the past, now, and future. And one of the biggest mistakes when it comes to understanding this is that when we're asked a question and we talk to people, we typically answer that question in the here and now. Somebody says, how are you doing? I'm good. What's your favorite color? Purple. What do you do for a living? And you answer that question. Then I came to realize that not many people put much thought into the questions that they ask people. But yet, we are led to respond by the questions that somebody didn't put much thought into. And that got me to ask the question of, maybe the question's wrong. Maybe I need to think about something that's beyond just the question. And so I want to share with you an example of somebody that I was helping. As a client of mine, I was asked to help this individual get ready for a very big interview. And this was an interview for a very large organization. They were going to be the head of the organization. And this interview was 5 to 7 hours, about 8 people asking them questions. And they asked me to help. And so I was like, sure, I'd love to help. And this woman walked in. She was a PhD, and I watched her walk in the room. And you know one of those people that when they walk in a room, you know it's not your room anymore, it's theirs? This is what she was like. She was elegant, professional. She stood tall. She was a PhD. She knew what she was talking about. First thought that went through my mind was, I'm like, how am I going to help her? I actually would like to take her class. And so she came in, and we do the same process that we always do. We put her in a chair, and we had 3 seats in front, and I sit off to the side. We asked her questions, and I do what I do. I look at facial expressions, micro-expressions, body language sequencing, tone of voice, all of the things, story structure, the things that I look at when it comes to storytelling, conversation, and influence. And we asked her the first question. Tell us something that you're proud of. Tell us something you're proud of. And she responded the way all of us have been taught and the way you're probably going to be taught when you get older, to be short, concise, and to the point. She hitched her coat. She didn't talk this way. She talked this way. It was awesome. Short, concise, and to the point. And she said, proudest moment of my life, I got straight A's my last year in school. Short, concise, and to the point. So the feedback she got was, wow, it was great, it was short, it was concise, it was to the point. And then they asked me. I didn't have the same response. You see, she missed something critical to how our brains function. Our brains take information based on the frames of reference of what we understand. Our reality is based on what our past has been, what we understand, what we call a frame. She gave us no frame. She just answered the question. And we have this unconscious process in our mind when somebody doesn't do that to fill in the gap for them. Isn't that nice? Well, they didn't tell us what that meant, so we'll just fill it in. The challenge with that is that they fill it in based on their own history. And so, because she gave us no frame, what she did was open up the door for us to frame her in other ways. And so they said, Rene, what'd you think? And I looked at her, I said, straight A's your last year in school, so you're a procrastinator? Does that you mean you're going to procrastinate for us as well when you work for us? She looked at me like I was crazy. I said, oh, did mommy and daddy pay for school and you didn't have to work that hard and they maybe got upset with you the last year, so maybe you turned things around, which happened to be the easiest year? Is that what happened? And now she's got a tear running down her eye. And I looked at her and I said, Janice, it's not her real name. I said, clearly that was important to you, wasn't it? She just nodded her head. I said, why? Because you gave me no frame. You gave me no history, no context. You just said straight A's your last year in school. And my brain goes all sorts of ways. I said, but it was important, wasn't it? And she just nodded her head, and I said, why? It took her about a minute and a half to compose herself, and she gave me the answer. But before I give you the answer, I want you to pay attention to what happens when I give you the answer that she gave me. See, emotion, persuasion, influence, connection, all the things that we need to progress in this world, unfortunately, isn't a logical process. It's an emotional one. And so when I give you the answer of what she said, I want you to pay attention to what happens. You may not have a word for it. So I said, why was that important? And she looked at me and she said, when you've been told you're stupid your entire life by adults, you tend to believe them. And I looked myself in the mirror my last year in school and I said, either I'm going to believe them forever or I'm going to do something about it. And I did something about it. A little different story now, isn't it? Same content. Still got straight A's my last year in school. But something prior to that was added that made the story, in essence, come to life. Made it tangible. Made it something we could sink our teeth into. Made it something we can connect with. That is what we call a frame. And so what she did, if you look at this picture, she answered in the here and now. But what I asked for was something back here. And so our first step in this process is we got to stop this need to answer that immediate question. Somebody looks at you and says, what's wrong with you? And you go, what do you mean what's wrong with me? Is something wrong with me? All of a sudden, we've accepted that question, but maybe there's something else going on there. And so in this case, what we needed was what we call a frame, or a frame of reference. Now, so how does that work? I think I spelled frame right. There we go. So a frame. That's the first step. I'll give you one real quick example. What's your favorite color? Blue. Blue. What's your favorite color? Blue. Blue. We got two blue. That's good. School colors. What's your favorite color? Purple.
Purple.
Purple. My favorite color? You want to ask me?
Sure. What's your favorite color?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. I was actually born in Miami and moved to Minnesota when I was 7 years old. Lived Miami, Minnesota, half-time till I was about 16 years old. And then, so I really never felt at home, but there was always one place that I felt at home. If I was on a beach and I looked up and I saw palm trees. If I saw palm trees, I knew I was close to my friends, my family, my music, my food, all the things that made me feel closest to home. And so palm trees are green, so my favorite color is green. Think about the difference between those two answers. Yes, one was a little bit longer, but did you learn something about me in my answer? Did you learn about my history, my culture, my passion, things that are important to me? Same question, different answer. One had no frame, one had a frame. You said blue, so probably Minnetonka. We had purple, maybe a Minnesota Vikings fan. Who knows? We don't know what that means. Maybe it could be a Prince fan. Because the thing is, maybe it could be. That's the process of the brain trying to fill in that gap that wasn't given by the speaker. All of you, when you're presenting ideas, you're going to be asked questions, and you're going to feel that inner need to just start answering that question that was asked. But I want you to think about what happens when you put that frame there first. So now, that's the first step, is to Stop answering questions in this here and now. Second step is to understand what the frame is, where it came from. Now, there's lots of different framing devices. Your personal story, for me, was probably one of my favorites. You saw it with the speakers here using awesome frames. You saw a musical frame with her singing and playing music for you. All of that allows us to engage a lot better. So this here, this frame creates emotional movement, emotional engagement. If you remember when she said, I was told I was stupid my entire life, how many of you, just by show of hands, felt an emotional shift inside when I said that? And see, that emotional shift that you feel is connection. You probably felt empathy. Some people feel protective of that person. How dare they say something about a child like that? Some people maybe have had people tell us stories like that. I remember one of my teachers literally pulled me aside when I was in college and said, I don't think you're cut out for college. You should probably quit. I remember being so angry, offended. But there was another side of me that says, you know what? I probably should step up my game a little bit. But all of those things, whatever it was, that frame helped us connect. That's important, but it's not what creates influence. That's not what creates action. And in business, it's not what creates value. That's a big question there, is what is and what doesn't create value. Big confusion is saying, is value who we are or what we bring to the table? Value isn't about who we are, because we're valuable people, yes. But from a business perspective, it's about the value that we bring to the marketplace and the ability to sell a product or an idea, to be able to create revenue, to drive down costs. And so we have to balance both of those elements, whether we want to or not. And so the third part, the last part here is what we call the tie down. The tie down. Now, a tie down answers a question of what this means to you is. Frame creates emotional movement. Answering the here and now answers the message or the question that was asked. But this tie down here is what creates movement towards something. It's what creates influence. So I'm going to give you all three of those examples together, and I want you to feel the difference of what it feels like. So if you remember the first one, we said, tell us something you're proud of. And her answer was direct to the here and now. She said, I got straight A's my last year in school. Frames went wild. Maybe it was she's a procrastinator. Maybe she was, parents paid for school. Who knows what the answer was? But now, if somebody is not trained, they'll do that. But if they're trained a little bit in the art of contextualization and understanding that maybe it's important to give a story ahead of time, she might have said something, well, unfortunately, I was surrounded by a lot of adults that told me I wasn't real smart. And so we understand that. But then at the end, we don't know what to do. Now, she's in a situation of an interview, and she's trying to influence that interview. What do you think she wants them to say? She wants them to say, you're hired. I can see how you would fit in this organization. And so her influence objective in this case is to get the job. So when she adds the tie down, what I want you to do is pay attention again to how you feel when you hear that third part. So her answer could have sounded something like this. Somebody says, well, tell us something you're proud of. And she says, her frame. Unfortunately, growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of adults that told me I wasn't real smart. And as a kid, fortunately, you tend to listen to adults that way, and I didn't do real well in school. But something happened to me my last year in school where I looked myself in the mirror, and I said, either I'm going to believe them forever, or I'm going to do something about it. And remember, I got the help that I needed, put my nose to the grindstone, and I'm proud to tell you that I got straight A's my last year in school. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, if I do get a chance to work with your team, this is the tie down. There's going to be times, I'm sure, that we're going to be told there are things that we can't do. Market pressure pushing us against the wall, fear, uncertainty. But I promise you this, if I do get a chance to work with you and your team, I'll be out there with you, if not out in front, overcoming those challenges in the same way I overcame them in my own personal life. But this time for you and for your team. Frame, message, tie down. What ends up happening now is that the message feels complete. The listener now can take that emotion and it feels funneled towards a behavior. The listener says, wow, I bought into that story. I get it. It makes sense. I connected. People told you weren't smart. I remember I was told that way. Or even if I wasn't, how dare somebody do that? I'm connected with you. And now all of a sudden you overcame it. And now I can envision you next to me in the battlefield in the business world. This is the person we need. And that feeling of wanting to move towards something begins. Ideas are great. To me, the saddest thing is an idea. When I see somebody that can't communicate that idea, I see somebody that feels trapped. I feel somebody that feels imprisoned. I look at some of the best ideas that go unheard. I feel like that's a crime. Where I watch mediocre ideas delivered in the right way take flight, where some of the best ideas maybe just didn't learn the sequence of how the brain works. But the message I want to leave you with, for this to work, it can't be a technique, it can't be a tactic. If you realize the sequence begins with the heart. Framing, and the most powerful ways to frame is to allow your heart to speak first. Most of us don't even allow our hearts to speak. We've been taught that, well, this is business, we leave this elsewhere. We've got to put our business hats on. But when she spoke from the heart, and she told us what really happened, what she was told and how she was treated, all of a sudden we could engage our hearts. But then we want to teach our hearts to speak in sequence. Oftentimes our hearts speak out of sequence. Have you ever told somebody you love them too quickly? I love you, and you're like, ooh, didn't mean to say that. Or maybe you waited too long to tell somebody you love them. Now it's too late. Getting our hearts to speak is the first part, but then getting it to speak in the sequence of how our brain works. That's the key. Your heart to speak in the sequence of your brain. And so when you put all of these together, frame, message, tie down, what I really truly hope is that this sparks an innate sense of curiosity to Google what frames are, to search your own personal stories, to reflect on your life. Because the best part about frames is they've already happened. They're happening every single day. When you show up late to something, you miss a bus, you flunk a paper, a test, something, all of those become stories that you can use to deliver a message at the right time, to connect with somebody at the right moment, somebody who's been through struggle, to say, you know what, I've been there before. All of those pieces, all of your history is happening right now. And if you can learn to let your heart speak in the sequence of the brain, I promise you, there truly isn't anything that you can't do. Thank you very much.